My name is Mike Haw. I'm the board president of Center for Environmental Initiatives, which is the parent organization for Genesee River Watch. Genesee River Watch is a concept that has been applied all over the country in river keepers, bay keepers, sound keepers, but never before in the Genesee River Basin. We're an organization that is focused on improving the entire Genesee River Basin, taking a systemic approach to that activity. There are two key aspects to what Genesee River Watch does. The first is the technical aspect, designed to improve the quality of the water and preserve that quality over time. Those are things like stream bank stabilization, reduction of waste going into the river, monitoring points where waste may enter the river, and generally trying to improve, as I said, the water quality itself. The other aspect has to do with driving public interest in the river. Genesee is one of the most publicly ignored rivers in the country. There are people in Rochester who don't know there's a river that runs right through the middle of it. There are lots of people in the region, for example, who don't know that the river behind me is also the river that runs through Letchworth State Park. So getting that knowledge out, getting people more interested in the river, getting them to understand how they can use the river and making that use a lot easier is another significant part of what we do. We are about 3 miles from the mouth of the river at Lake Ontario and about 157 miles from the Genesee's headwater springs in Gold, Pennsylvania.
So I visited the Genesee River recently and I've noticed that it is pretty dirty. So I definitely think we need an effort to help clean it up, and I think that what the Genesee River Watch is doing is really good for it and helping with the cause.
The Center for Environmental Initiatives was formed 42 years ago, initially as an organization designed to provide information on all things environmental. In that case, we're talking about water issues, transportation issues, air, waste, etc. About 3 years ago, we took a serious look at our strategy going forward and decided that focus was necessary, and we tried to find a particular aspect of what we had been doing that was going to be important to the Rochester region and that was within our capability and the experience that we had developed over the years. Out of that analysis came the idea of Genesee River Watch, a systemic approach to the entire Genesee River Basin, an approach that has been well modeled by river keepers, sound keepers, bay keepers all over the country, but one that had never been tried before in Rochester. There are over 100 organizations that have an interest in the Genesee River in some aspect of the Genesee River. Genesee River Watch is an all-volunteer effort at the moment. We do most of our work through our board of directors, and we're interested in recruiting volunteers to do any number of things. Some that are public outreach activities, developing and maintaining a database of members, some that are much more technical in nature, taking part in citizen water quality monitoring activities. There are quite a range of things, and if you look at our website you will see a list of those activities that you could take part in if you're interested in volunteering your time.
Our favorite thing to do on the Genesee River is go canoeing.
We're now upstream of Turning Point Park by, a couple hundred yards, I guess, and into an area that has a long industrial history in Rochester. The pilings behind me here used to be part of a 3 or 4 story tall rail trestle where coal cars from the southern tier and from Pennsylvania would come in, and the coal that they contained was loaded on the original ferry that went across the river, or across Lake Ontario. Behind me, however, is the remaining major industrial use of the river. This is a dock used by a nearly 500-foot-long freighter called the Stephen B. Roman that comes in periodically and brings cement to the S. Rock Ital Cementi facility, whose silos you can see up the hill behind me.
We appreciate the Genesee River Watch and hope it gets cleaned up soon.
Well, there's an enormous amount of sediment that comes down this river every year. In fact, there are farmers upstream in Allegheny County and Wyoming County who are losing up to an acre of land a year to the river. The sediment that makes it through Mount Morris Dam ends up down here, either in the lower river basin, where the water gets slower and the sediment starts to precipitate out, or out into Lake Ontario. And anybody who's been out to the end of the pier in Rochester Harbor has seen the mud flow out into the lake.
I love walking around the river and I love canoeing. It's really fun.
Down Petton Street, and Petton Street ends at the river, right here, essentially south of the Rochester Harbor, and there is a canoe and kayak launch point here, which is informal, as you can see out in front of us. But there's some plans to make that much more formal and much more accommodating. About a quarter of a mile that way is Rochester Harbor and Lake Ontario, and you see in front of you the new Patrick O'Rourke Bridge. 160 miles that way to the south and upriver, which is a little unusual in the United States, is the source of the Genesee in Gold, Pennsylvania. And it flows out of Gold in the mountains around Gold as a clear stream that you could step across.
What the Genesee River Watch is doing is a really good thing and will really help out the river.
The question of pollution in the Genesee comes up pretty often. Obviously, you see the sediment that's in the water. With that sediment comes a fair amount of nutrients in the form of nitrogen and most particularly phosphorus that is entrained in the soil that gets washed into the river. We don't see that materializing as an algal problem too much as long as it's in the river and the water's flowing. But when you get out into the lake, it contributes to the kinds of algae blooms that cause the parks along the lake, beaches along the lake to be fairly frequently closed. Issues include malfunctioning septic tanks in rural areas, malfunctioning wastewater treatment plants, because some of those plants are getting rather old, and the waste that comes from animals in particularly smaller farms, those farms that are not subject to confined animal feeding operation laws, and also farms that are marginal enough where the farmers have difficulty.
I really enjoy walking on the pathways by the Genesee River. It's really relaxing and peaceful, and it has great scenery.
Well, we're in the High Falls Historic District, the old industrial part of Rochester. It found its power from the falls of the Genesee. We've got a slightly unique view of High Falls. Most people see it from the front of the falls. This is from the top. A little scary if you look at the speed of the water going through that edge. And if you think about Sam Patch, the daredevil in the 1820s or 30s who ended his life falling off a tightrope over this fall. That said, what can you do on this river?
I had a really fun time coming here, and one of my favorite parts was the view of the Genesee River.
Well, here we're at the Genesee Waterways Center, just south of RIT and across from Genesee Park. And the question's been asked, what are the fun things that one can do on the Genesee River? Well, one obvious thing that is boating. Genesee Waterways Center will rent you canoes and kayaks. It hosts racing scull teams as well. So a lot of car top boating in the harbor, in the water boating, much bigger boats, fishing boats of various sorts. And you can take those up as far as Lower Falls before you run into a roadblock there. As far as boating is concerned, if you go to our website, there's a map produced several years ago by the Sierra Club of access points all the way down to the Pennsylvania border for car top boating, kayaks, canoes, and paddleboards if you wanted to do paddleboards. In the area of Rochester proper, one of Genesee River Watch's objectives is to increase the number of access points along the river for car top boating. That is in line with the city's local waterfront redevelopment plan. They're looking to do the same thing. And in addition to points where you can actually put in a boat, take out a boat more conveniently, we'd like to see the development of some areas where boaters during the course of a paddle could pull off, have a picnic, rest, enjoy what's going on the banks of the Genesee more easily than they can today. So that gives us a goal for the future and something to look forward to.